am Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today, making the world a more accessible and inclusive place for people with disabilities. We'll talk about that with disability rights attorney Haben Girma.
And we want to hear your questions and your comments on improving accessibility. Tweet them to us at AJStream or share them in our live YouTube chat.
In a new memoir, Haben Girma, the first deafblind graduate of Harvard Law School, reflects on childhood, her Eritrean-Ethiopian identity, and journey to becoming an outspoken advocate for disability rights. While a student at Harvard, Girma helped develop the digital braille device that allows her to read information typed to her through a computer keyboard. Today, she travels around the world, promoting a message of inclusivity, and shares her life experiences as a deaf-blind black woman and a child of refugees. Girma has received honours from leaders including former US President Barack Obama and German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
She has also become one of the leading voices in improving the accessibility of the digital world. Girma's life so far is told in the book Haben, the deaf-blind woman who conquered Harvard Law. Haben Girma joins us today with her typist, Claire Baldi. Also, our viewers might notice the box in the corner of the screen today, and that is because our conversation is being interpreted in American Sign Language. Haben, everyone, welcome to the stream.
Haben, I'm going to get started with a beautiful picture that you shared yourself on Father's Day, which is a picture of your dad, and he's reading, and he's asleep. And you're asleep, lying on top of him, and he's trying to read. And it just gave us some insight into the closeness that you have with your parents. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. So my parents love and adore me. They also are a little protective, like many parents. And growing up, we struggled with the challenge of my parents wanting to keep me safe and protected, and me wanting to experience as much of the world as possible. I'm deaf-blind, I have limited vision and hearing, and there are a lot of negative stereotypes about what people with disabilities can and can't do. And that's the heart of the arguments I've had with my parents growing up. There was a situation where I wanted to help build a school in Mali, West Africa. And my parents said, no, it's not safe. And I told them, you are from Africa. My dad grew up in Ethiopia. My mom grew up in Eritrea. How could they tell me it's not safe? It was because they were feeling protective as parents. It had nothing to do with Africa. Even if I was building a school in, say, Montana, I'm sure they would have told me, no, it's not safe. So I tried, this is a story of advocacy. So I advocated and I told them, I know my abilities. I know what I can and can't do, and I can build a school. And they still said no. I was really frustrated. I'm sure lots of kids can relate to this, of wanting to do something and your parents saying no. So I asked myself, how can I convince them? They're not believing me, even though I feel like an expert when it comes to my abilities. So I asked myself, who else can help convince them that I can do this? So we brought in the program manager who takes students to developing countries to help build schools. And she sat down at lunch with me and my parents, and they asked her, how can Haben build a school? She can't see. How would that work? And the manager told them, I don't know, but we'll try. We'll find a way. It's okay if you don't know how to do something, as long as you try to seek solutions, as long as you try to figure it out and make it work. And we did. I went to Mali. I helped build a school. And I literally mean building a school. We were shoveling, making bricks, digging the latrine so that kids in this village in Mali could get an education. The heart of the program, though, was about teaching high school students that we can have an impact in the world. Even if you have a disability, you still can have an impact in the world. When I came back home, my parents were more convinced, but only slightly. Even now, even after graduating from law school, they're still nervous and still protective.
And that probably will never end as long as they're your parents. Haben, I wanted to also bring in our community here. We got a tweet. So many people follow your work online and love what you stand for and love what you advocate for. This is Ibrahim, who's one of them. Ibrahim on Twitter says, I watched your TEDx talk, and I must say you are super intelligent. We both know no two disabilities are the same. We all have our uniqueness. But how did you cope with ableism growing up as a child in the States?
Ableism is a problem all over the world. In the United States, in Eritrea and Ethiopia, ableism is the belief that people with disabilities are inferior to the non-disabled. So employers thinking, don't hire someone with a disability, they won't do the job. Or teachers thinking, we're not letting kids with disabilities in our class because they can't learn. Those are harmful assumptions, and we need to get rid of them. When I was a kid, I didn't know how to advocate. I missed out on so many things. My high school graduation, there were so many speeches that I missed. I had no idea what they were saying because I didn't know how to advocate. Slowly, growing up, I started to advocate. Then I started to have more access. And not only me, every time I advocated, I removed a barrier. And it helped the students who came after me. That's really what drove me to become a lawyer, realizing that when I create positive change, it benefits our whole community.
There is a way that you write that takes us into your world. We see inside the way that you are thinking. We see through your eyes. We see what you see, and sometimes it's not that much. We try and understand the world from your perspective. So for instance, in your living room, there's a step. And you're not sure exactly where that step is, so you do a jump. So you can pretty much guess where you think that step is, and then you jump. So you are navigating the world, and we are navigating the world as a reader in your memoir through you. That way of describing things for people who do not have disabilities, how have they reacted to understanding more from your perspective?
So there's so many ways to experience the world. Seeing is one way. If you don't have access to visual information, maybe you can hear it. If you don't have access to sight or hearing, maybe you can feel it. So throughout the stories in my book, I describe environments in multiple ways. I talk about the feelings, tables, the weather, food, taste, smells. There's so many ways to experience the world. Some people ask, why would blind people travel if they can't see the sights? And as a blind person, that sounds like a silly question to me. There's so many experiences to have when you are out and about. I went to Dubai several years ago, and it was so interesting to feel the different changes in weather, to meet people and learn about the different cultures, the different foods, smells, so many experiences.
And so many of those experiences are detailed in your book, which is excellent. It's a quick read, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. So there are some members of our community who are already in love with it. One sent us a video comment. Her name is Monique Coleman. She's a teacher of the visually impaired. And here's what she wanted you to hear, Haben.
I just finished reading your book and I found it thoroughly engaging from beginning to end. Your wit, your tenacity, your love of learning and family, and certainly your humor shown through all of your experiences. I'm a TDI and I highly recommend your book for my students. They're and their parents, as well as from my family and friends who often ask me a lot of questions about the blindness community. And I'd love to point them to your book as a resource for learning more, and also just because it's a beautiful memoir. You touched a little bit in a very matter-of-fact kind of way on your multiple marginalized identities. At one point you spoke about being a Black, deaf, and blind woman at a Harvard Law School event. And I'm wondering if you could touch a little bit more on that experience, because it's not often talked about in the blindness community, and how that nuanced perspective impacts the work you do today.
So her question is about your multiple identities, being Black, being blind, and deaf, and a woman at Harvard Law School. How did that inform your time there?
So that comment, first of all, thank you, Monique. I'm so thrilled that you enjoyed my book and the stories. That specific comment comes from a scene where I'm at Harvard Law School and there's a networking reception for law students to meet with real live lawyers. And at the networking reception, I stood out as a woman who's also Black, with a dog and a funny computer. So I was ultra visible. At the same time, I was also invisible, because when people see me, they think of all the assumptions, all the images we have in society of blind people, the most common images of the blind beggar, and with that comes low expectations and people assuming, she's probably boring, not gonna talk to her, or she probably can't work in my law firm, I'm not gonna go meet her. All those negative assumptions. Then throughout our history, the words deaf and dumb have often gone together, which hurts the deaf community. So many of us are extremely intelligent, but people assume we're incompetent, and they miss out on talent, they miss out on opportunities. So all of my identities intersect, creating, by society, creating more barriers with society's assumption and ableism and racism and sexism. So when we address disability rights, we also need to advance opportunities for women and people of color. No one advances if someone is still left behind.
There's a story that comes from the book, which is when you went to the White House and it was a celebration of the American Disabilities Act. You were the opening speaker for President Obama at the time and Vice President Joe Biden. I have a picture of you here with your Braille machine. But even behind this amazing celebration and people saying, what a great speech, the preparation was still a challenge. So when you wanted to go up to the podium to check it out, as every speaker loves to do, there was a challenge involved in that, but you solved that problem. Tell us how you solved that problem.
So the White House was celebrating the EDA, the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this was a disability-centered event, all about inclusion and access, and I still faced a barrier. And my point with that story is, even among family, even at disability events, I still find myself advocating, partly because I have such a rare disability. Deaf blindness is rare. It's hard to find spaces where I'm automatically included. Here's what happened at the White House. When I arrived, I brought a typist and communication facilitator named Cameron, who's highly experienced and done all kinds of events with me. And they told us she could not go on stage with me. We asked why. She's really skilled and I want someone who's experienced. And they said, sorry, it's protocol. They wanted me to go with someone who had not had experience with deaf-blind individuals. There was no time to change the system. So what I did really quickly is I trained that person and I taught him how to guide. The best way to guide for me is to communicate environmental information the way a dancer communicates music. So through your shoulder and arm. So we practiced going on and off the stage, and I taught him how to use the keyboard and braille display. Luckily, it worked out well, but people should trust, organizations and institutions should trust people with disabilities when we request accommodations. We are our experts. We know what works for us, and we need society to listen.
If I may, just a sneaky little story off the back of that. I'm going to show a picture of President Obama at the time and then you, and he is typing to you. He decides he's not going to speak anymore. He's going to type directly to you. And then in the background, we have the former Vice President, Joe Biden, and he wrote a little message to you as well. Do you remember what he wrote to you? I want you to tell the world, because he's known for his empathy and rather warm approach to meeting people.
Warm approach indeed.
Tell the world.
So when I first met him, the first thing he says, not hi, not nice to meet you. The first thing he says is, I love you. I didn't know what to say. I was flustered. So I said, thank you. But I was thinking, did he just declare love? What does this mean? And sometimes people, when they encounter something new, they accidentally blurt out things that just touch on the edge of what they mean. So I try to see the best in the situation and assume that people mean well. And I took it as a compliment in him trying to communicate respect and admiration.
So many of these instances, and you detail a couple of them in the book, hinge on that, on people meaning well, but not knowing what to say. And it leads to sometimes some awkward circumstances. So I wanted to share a couple of tweets from Anna M. on Twitter, who says, the way to diffuse those situations is humor. She writes, humor can relax everyone when you make a joke of your limits, after which people can then listen better. She goes on to say, I have so many questions for Haben. Blush. Question 1, how do you find happiness in life? You always sound so happy, so calm, and composed. So Haben, I'm hoping you can answer both of those questions. 1, how do you find happiness? But also, how do you then use humor to diffuse potentially awkward situations?
Humor is a way to happiness. Humor dispels any disability-related awkwardness. People and other oppressed groups also end up finding that humor is a great tool to break the ice and help people feel comfortable. It shouldn't be our job to make non-disabled people feel comfortable, but it's a tool if you find yourself in that situation to help break the ice and hopefully teach them inclusion, teach them to be better advocates. How do I find happiness? Happiness is a process. Be honest with yourself. What are your struggles? What are your challenges? And once you accept them and address them, you can work towards solutions. So happiness is a process of constantly having those conversations with yourself.
There's a way that you approach your advocacy in the book, which is by storytelling. You tell a story, you use it as an illustration, you give some stats, and then you say, do better. This is how we can do better. I am sharing a picture with our audience of you in Juneau in Alaska at a glacier, and that was a time when you were hoping to get a summer job. You were super qualified, really smart student, and you couldn't get a job. And you share the statistic of about 70% of blind people never work. So this idea of being a person with disabilities and not being able to work, how are you working to change that?
That's a good question. So when I was in college, I really wanted a summer job, just like lots of other college students. And one of my friends told me, I know a place where there are lots of summer jobs, Alaska. And he was right. There's a large tourism industry in Juneau, Alaska, and lots of summer jobs because of the tourism industry. Employers would see my resume and get excited and invite me to interviews. I was valedictorian in high school, really good grades in college, lots of volunteer experiences, and still employers didn't want to hire me. Ableism, assumptions that I was incompetent, I would not be able to do the job. I applied to all kinds of jobs: dishwashing, shelving gift shops, folding laundry in hotel. These are tactile activities. They don't require sight, but they still assumed I couldn't do it and they wouldn't hire me. That introduced me to employment discrimination, and it made me realize working hard is not enough. We also need employers to get rid of ableism. Stop assuming that people with disabilities are incompetent. Eventually that summer, I found one employer who was inclusive. She hired me to be a front desk clerk at a small gym in Juneau, Alaska. So my responsibilities included managing the cash register, the machines in the gym, cleaning the changing rooms. She didn't care whether I used sight or non-visual technique, as long as I got the job done. Lots of people with disabilities have alternative techniques, and alternative techniques are equal in value to mainstream techniques. Employers need to know that. One day, a woman came to the front desk of the gym and she said, "A treadmill isn't working." I followed her to the treadmills and I pressed the on button. Nothing happened. I tried the other buttons on the machine. Nothing happened. So I felt the machine from top to bottom. And on the bottom, I felt a switch. I flicked the switch and the machine went to life. The lady says, "Oh my goodness, I didn't see that switch." I told her I didn't see it either.
Haben, sometimes that discrimination also extends to the digital space. And so I want to share a comment from a disability rights lawyer in Berkeley, in the Bay Area of California, where Haben is also from. Have a listen.
Digital accessibility is a human right of disabled people around the globe. And here in the United States, we have laws that protect that right. People have been using those laws for more than 20 years to make sure the digital world is available to everyone. Recently, Domino's Pizza has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to try to limit how disabled people can use laws to protect their right to be part of the digital world. We don't know what's going to happen with that, and we won't know probably for another year, but we do know that people with disabilities and their lawyers will continue to fight to make sure the digital world is inclusive. I'd love to hear from Haben about a lawsuit that she worked on, that she talks about in her book, that made a digital library with hundreds of thousands of books available to everyone.
So Haben, we have just about a minute left in the show, but can you talk about that lawsuit?
In my book, I talk about a lawsuit where a library didn't want to make their website accessible. They said, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, digital places don't have to be accessible. And we took them to court. And the court decided, yes, online places do fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And after that, the library script settled and agreed to make their website, to make their digital library accessible to blind readers. Businesses that choose inclusion gain more customers. There are over 1 billion people with disabilities around the world. It's smart to choose inclusion.
Haben Girma, thank you very much for being with us. Haben, the deaf-blind woman who conquered Harvard Law, is the name of her memoir. I can't think of a better way to end this show than here on my computer, watching Haben celebrating the release of her book with a swing dance, of course. Enjoy.